Obamacare is being argued in front of the Supreme Court. Will the individual mandate survive judicial review? I'm Allen Barton. Stand by for Front Page.
It's a plan that asks everyone to take responsibility for meeting this challenge. Everybody, including employers and individuals.
If a mandate was the solution, we could try that to solve homelessness by mandating everybody buy a house.
A system where every American bears responsibility for owning health insurance.
What are you going to do about it? Are you going to fine them? Are you going to garnish their wages?
Some of the reforms that we want for the insurance market are very hard to achieve unless we've got everybody covered.
We don't want to put in a situation in which on the front end we are mandating them, we are forcing them to purchase insurance, and if the subsidies are inadequate, the burden is on them and they will be penalized.
All right, joining me in studio, Don Watkins, fellow at the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights. Terry Jones, associate editor for Investors Business Daily. That's a commercial there showing Obama quite clearly on both sides of the issue regarding the individual mandate. Terry, what's been happening up in front of the Supreme Court? It seems like a rough week for them.
Yeah, it was a terrible week. I mean, look, on all the constitutional bases for this law, they've basically been losing the argument. I mean, whether it was its severability or the mandate itself, or even the extension, which it is, into the Commerce Clause. Giving sweeping powers to the government to regulate virtually any aspect of our life and to make us buy things we don't want to buy. Those things were a disaster for the government's case. They couldn't make a case, and it was, I think, obvious as the second day began that this was a disaster.
Don, how are they using? I mean, obviously the big clauses are the Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause of the Constitution that they're trying to use to say that they have the right to advance this power. How are they trying to use those two clauses to advance this so-called right?
Well, I mean, look, if you look at what the Constitution was set up to do in the way that James Madison described it, was to give the government defined, enumerated powers and say, these are the things you can do, anything else you can't do. But since that time, you have clauses that have been used to basically give the government the power to do anything. And so in particular, you have the Commerce Clause, which says which has been interpreted to basically mean anything you do that in any way affects interstate commerce, the government can regulate that. And what this is really showing, I think this case is showing, is that if you hold that view, then the government can do anything, and there is no longer limitations on the government. And so what the kind of argument that's going on right now is the government's trying to say, well, there's really some limitations, and they're trying to come up with some way.
Well, they're trying to identify the health insurance market as this unique market, which requires then a unique mandate. A lot was being made yesterday on the day about the mandate about Kennedy, which is a swing vote. And during the first hour, he was quite clearly suspicious. And then everyone was clinging on to this second hour where he was trying to find this so-called limiting principle. Terry, you want to talk to that a little bit? Like, what would be the limiting principle that either is in the bill or that Kennedy could extrapolate to let him support it?
I honestly think it was a strategic thing in some respects for him because I think he was trying to give the government an opportunity to make its case that there was some limiting principle inherent in this. But as I think it was Scalia said, well, could you make us buy broccoli? Cell phones?
Yeah, because they were trying to say, well, everyone is automatically in the marketplace for healthcare, and then Scalia was like, well, we're automatically in the marketplace for food. There's a lot of things that everyone is automatically in the marketplace for.
Yeah, and this is the problem, and this is something that hasn't been discussed, is that this is a totally dysfunctional market, healthcare. No disagreement there, but it's dysfunctional because of government's involvement. And the idea that the solution to government's past involvement, which screwed up our healthcare market, is more government, is an absurd one on the very face. And this also, I hate to say it, but past decisions by the Supreme Court have been overly broad and expansive and too much in favor of giving government a role in our lives. And that's why this election is important, because we need to have Supreme Court jurists who are going to go back and chip away at these old decisions and restore our rights, because if we don't, we're going to have a big problem in this country.
Don, looking at the effects of Obamacare on the medical industry, apparently 9 out of 10 physicians surveyed by the Doctors Company, which is a medical liability insurer for doctors, said they would not recommend health care as a profession. Fully 60% said that health care reform is going to have a negative impact on patient care. 80% would say it have a negative impact on their earnings. What do you think of this survey? Is it something to be taken seriously in terms of what doctors say they may do or how they think it will be affected by Obamacare? Does that mean anything?
I mean, it's certainly consistent with what I've heard when I've spoken to doctors, is that, I mean, the ability of them to actually make money, to actually get reimbursed for their services, it's very difficult, particularly the more that they actually try to deal with any of these government programs. So if they take Medicare patients or Medicaid patients.
Well, it's interesting. What's happening is I feel like what's being created, because I've known several doctors, I have doctors in the family and blah, blah, blah. But there is sort of this other market being developed where basically fee-for-service, cash up front at like $10,000 a year, cash up front. I'll cover your family for pretty much anything you guys need other than like the most advanced like surgeries and stuff like that. And so what's happening now is that you are creating again a bifurcated system where people who have money are going to purchase the care they want. Doctors are going to get out of all of these insurance plans. Isn't there sort of this reverse incentive that happens? The more and more they cut the reimbursements for Medicare, the more people are like, I'm just not going to take this patient.
There is. It's not worth their trouble because they actually lose money on a per patient basis. And I actually had a personal doctor who did exactly what you said. They went over to a system. He went over to a system called concierge care, where you pay an upfront fee every year. They give you 2 complete physicals and 1 X-ray and 1 other thing, I guess, an emergency visit or something like that. And it's all taken care of with that 1 fee. And doctors are increasingly going to do this. They're going to take themselves off the grid. There's no question about that. We did a survey, and it created quite a stir when Obamacare was being debated, and we asked how many doctors were going to retire or leave the profession, and the number we got was close to 50% when Obamacare was passed. And we still see in this survey a similar number.
Well, aren't we this close in terms of the political climate in this country where they could pass a law saying unless you participate in Medicare, blah, 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 you may not receive a medical license from your state medical board, and thus prevent doctors essentially from avoiding the system. I feel we're that close to it.
That certainly could be a possibility, and that's one of the reasons why it's important this be struck down, because the government's extension of its authority into every crevice of private life is unacceptable in a free society.
Now, Don, what's interesting is that the number of medical school applicants hit an all-time high in 2011. What do you think of that? It seems as though this idea of massive healthcare reform is not affecting people's desire to go into medicine. Do you think that's a matter of the desire of medicine to go into medicine being something that you're passionate about as a practice, and the idea of how and you will make money from it, and whether the government will do this or that to you in terms of your ability to make money is less important than that passion?
I mean, I think there's a number of things. First of all, I don't know, but there very well could be incentives to go into medicine right now. But above and beyond that, A, they're not in the field yet. So what you want to be looking at to see what's going to happen long term is who are the people in the field and how are they responding to it. Because a young idealistic person, it doesn't strike him of what this will really involve day to day. And then the next thing you have to think about is what kind of people are going into the field. And what happens over time is that it doesn't necessarily diminish the number of people who go into the field of medicine, but you get the kind of people who are able and willing to operate under bureaucracy, which is not the best minds, the men of the greatest ability that used to populate and still in many ways do populate American medicine. And that should be very scary.
All right, gentlemen, good, interesting conversation. For Don and Terry, I'm Allen Barton. You've been watching Front Page.